Greetings. Warm Advent blessings. Oh, dear sisters and brothers and my dear friends. This is your Pastor Yeti. Saturday, the end of week 2 in our Advent. I'm going to talk about Peter's denial. Matthew 26, verses 69 to 75. Meanwhile, Peter sat outside in the courtyard. One of the servant girls came up to him. "You were with Jesus the Galilean too, weren't you?" she said. He denied it in front of everyone. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. He went out to the gateway. Another girl saw him and said to the people who were there, "This fellow was with Jesus the Nazarene." Once more he denied it, this time swearing, "I don't know the man." After a little while, the people standing around came up and said to Peter, "You really are one of them. Look, the way you talk makes it obvious." Then he began to curse and swear, "I don't know the man." And then, all at once, the cock crowed. And Peter remembered. He remembered the words Jesus had spoken to him. "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went outside and cried like a baby. I'm going to tell you a story about the English writer David Lodge, in his novel Things. He tells the story of a woman who discovers after his death that her husband, whom she had loved and trusted, had been regularly unfaithful to her for several years. At the same time, she meets an unscrupulous computer scientist who tries to persuade her, among other things, that computers can, in principle, do the things that humans can do, including thinking for themselves. She resists this idea, but with difficulty and without total conviction. Meanwhile, she has built up a deeper anger and resentment against her late husband. Finally, returning to her old home towards the end of the book and seeing his photographs, something in her gives way, and she breaks down and cries and cries. And she forgives him. And then she realizes the answer to the other question. This is something a computer could never, ever do. Crying, she says, is a puzzler. It seems to come from somewhere which works closely in harmony with the bits of us that computers can replicate. And yet, it goes so far beyond what they can do that we have to see tears as a key signpost of what it means to be a human being. Peter's tears at the end of this story are the main thing that distinguish him from Judas in the next chapter. There is all the difference in the world between genuine repentance and mere remorse. As Paul Riley notes in one of his letters to Corinth, 2 Corinthians 7:10. The one leads to life, the other to death. Peter's tears, shaming, humiliating, and devastating though they were a sign of life. Judas' anger and bitterness led straight to death. They had been a long time coming. Peter had recovered quite quickly, we may imagine, from the near humiliation of trying to walk on the water, only to need rescuing. He had, no doubt, been hurt and humiliated when Jesus spun round and told him off, telling him he was a Satan. He had been perplexed with the rest of them as Jesus had done dramatic things in Jerusalem, and then had failed, as it must have seemed, to capitalize on them, continuing instead with his apparent determination to walk straight into a trap. Peter had done his best in the garden, as he said he would, but his best hadn't been good enough. And he must have had a sense that he had let Jesus down, but by not defending him, and in another way, by trying to do so in the wrong way. And now this, tired, frightened, short on sleep, but long on wine from the meal earlier, doing the right thing, following Jesus, for the wrong reason, wounded pride. Or perhaps, depending how you look at it, the wrong thing, walking straight into a trap, despite Jesus warning them against the time of trial. For the right reason, dodged loyalty, or dogged loyalty. Who knows or cares? The muddled motives and mixed emotions were no match for the 3 little questions from a couple of serving girls and a courtier with an ear from a northern accent. They were like small pins stuck into a large balloon, and Peter's world exploded in a roar of oaths and flood of bitter tears. Denying Jesus is such a sad thing to do, and yet we all do it. Despite the differences of culture and situation, we can even notice parallels, so close as to be almost amusing, between where Peter was at night and where we may find ourselves. A good dinner, plenty of wine, lots of excitement, short on sleep but determined to stay in the action. Then a few questions from people who don't even know. Or we don't even know. You're not one of those Jesus freaks, are you? I mean, nobody here actually believes in Jesus, do they? Well, it's all right to be interested in Jesus. But you don't want to take it to the extreme, do you? Or perhaps it's more subtle, where frontal attacks fails, the enemy will sneak round to an unlocked side entrance. If I don't make it in the morning, tomorrow, you will sign the office list for me to say I was there, won't you? Go on. It's just this one and nobody will know. You don't mind making a little bit on the side, do you? It speaks volumes both for the accuracy of the Gospels and for the humility of the leaders in the early church, that Peter's story, in all its graphic detail, remains there startlingly in all 4 Gospels. Of course, it makes other points as well. Notable that Jesus, who told them he'd do it, was a true prophet despite with Caiaphas and the other thoughts. But probably the main reason for this story being told and retold was simply that it provided such an excellent example of how not to do it. The early church was full of people who started off enthusiastically and then ran the risk of losing steam halfway down the line. Today's church faces the same problem. Equally, the early church saw many people, both great leaders and insignificant serving girls. Not that anyone is insignificant in God's family. Stand up to questioning, persecution, torture, and death rather than deny Jesus. If Peter could have seen young and innocent Christians 200 years later, facing lions in the amphitheater rather than deny their Lord, he would perhaps have felt that his negative example had served some purposes. What would he think if he should see the church today? Like Peter, every one of us stands in daily need of the grace of God that follows through repentance, enabling us to put the past behind us, make a fresh start, and continue in His service. Here are my reflection questions. What are the ways in which you have denied Jesus? How can you put things right? And God embrace you with His love. This is your Pastor Yeti.